among a fortunate few who sold what they could and fled to Australia, Canada, or the United States. Amnesty International claims that 70,000 Filipinos were imprisoned and 34,000 tortured during the almost 10-year period of martial law, September 1971 to January 1981. A total of 3,257 people are thought to have been killed by the military under the Marcos dictatorship, though many families will never know what happened to loved ones who simply disappeared. Lurid stories drifted out of the Philippines. Imprisonments and repeated rapes. American priests arrested and deported. When finally given the opportunity to air their grievances in 2013, Filipinos alleged 75,730 claims of human rights violations against the Marcos regime. Yet, despite all of this, Marcos was considered a friend of the United States. A history of American imperialism, liberation from Japanese occupation, and the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty bound together the security of the Philippines and the United States, committing them to mutual aid in the face of an aggressor in the Pacific. The long-standing presence of U.S. military bases throughout the country gave the United States access to the region, but also meant that it had to maintain amicable relations with the Philippines. That was relatively easy, because Marcos's struggle against an insurgency led by the Chinese communist-leaning New People's Army made him, like General Suharto in Indonesia, a key figure in the fight against communism in Asia. The United States did not want to see the Philippines fall to communism, and in that sense, America's Cold War policy clearly succeeded there. But by assuming responsibility for the Philippines' defense and training its military, the United States allowed the leaders of the Philippines to focus on internal threats, to their power, to their wealth, and to their continued rule. The foreign assistance provided to the Philippines during the Marcos era also undermined the broader development goals that the United States had for the country. During the decade of martial law, U.S. military assistance to the Philippines totaled the equivalent of about $1.16 billion, while overall foreign aid from the United States exceeded $3.5 billion. No matter what Marcos did, American aid dollars flowed. But even as aid kept coming, the Philippines, which had been one of the most prosperous countries in Asia, became one of the poorest. A system of crony capitalism enriched Marcos's friends and allies. Corruption reached far into the judiciary and police forces. Shortly after the declaration of martial law, the state took ownership of Philippine Airlines and forced foreign companies to give up their stakes in the Philippines National Oil Company. The military bought private steel mills to form the National Steel Corporation. And while the elite pillaged the economy, the percentage of Filipinos living in poverty grew. But eventually, the Filipino people fought back. 20 years after the People Power Revolution toppled the Marcos regime and he fled with his family to Hawaii, my mother returned to the Philippines. I sat beside her as our plane landed at Manila Ninoy Aquino International Airport. In the years between my mother's departure and her return in 2005, Ninoy Aquino had become the face of Philippine democracy. He was released from a military prison and allowed to travel with his family to the United States for medical treatment. After a brief stint lecturing at Harvard and MIT, Ninoy left to return to the Philippines and lead the opposition to Marcos's rule. He was assassinated with a single gunshot wound to the head when he landed in Manila at that same airport in August 1983. Although 16 servicemen, including a general, were eventually convicted in 1990 for his murder, conspiracy theories and allegations of the Marcos family's direct involvement persist. Ninoy's death marked the beginning of the end of the Marcos regime. Millions of Filipinos took to the streets, and the United States finally began to press Marcos for meaningful political reform. Ninoy's wife, Corazon Aquino, would challenge Marcos in elections and ultimately become the first woman president of the Philippines, following Marcos's resignation. Their son, Benigno Aquino III, would become president in June 2010 and sign into law the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act.